Right, good morning, everyone. My name is Don Anderson. I'm Chair of the Planning Matters Subcommittee. We're opening our meeting. I see we have a full quorum here and a couple of our regular visitors. It is now 10:30. Today is in the morning, and today is the 3rd of February in the year 2020. We're going to continue with our discussion of the the matter that was presented to us by the Planning Board on mixed use bylaw, as well as a table of uses. And I'm going to turn this over to Marilyn, who has some notes and bullet points we want to discuss today. Oh, and just one other thing, as I just forgot, since I'm an idiot, we are now recording this as for backup. This is being recorded here, and also we're on LCAT, obviously. Go ahead, Marilyn.
I hope it works, first of all. All right, thanks, Don. For the committee, since it's been 4 weeks since we've met, I went through some notes and put together some bullets that we need to not lose track of. And I'm gonna just read them to you, and we can start wherever you want, Don.
Okay.
And to see where we move from there. The first thing I wanna mention is I went to the planning board meeting on January the 21st. And as is customary, the planning board always asks any of us who are on this committee who are present for an update on our status here at this table. And at that time, it was requested by the planning board that when we have our document, our final document reviewed by our town attorney, that he also focus on the timeline for this process. They are concerned, and appropriately so, that we've been dealing with this for a little while, a long while, because we want to fine-tune something that's in the best interest of the entire town. Guidelines or timelines may have been passed. Now, they had their public hearing. It came to the council. The council immediately referred it to Planning Matters Subcommittee. There has been no public hearing before the council. My opinion is that's when the clock starts, but I'm not the attorney. And so that's just a question out there. We need to make sure that we have met whatever guidelines we need, so that we're not challenged when all is said and done.
My humble opinion, I don't think there's any, this isn't as if they're putting in a special permit application. This requires a zone change, and a zone change isn't a matter of right. So I think a zone change is not going to be automatically because of time. And obviously, we all are working as we can with certain inherent limitations.
However, Mass General Laws does require, that the planning board have a public hearing, and then they refer it to the legislative body in a certain period of time, and then the legislative body hopefully would have a public hearing.
Right.
And so, and Ralph has some information.
Yeah, exactly, actually, I just read it a couple days ago when I was going through the E-code. What it specifically states is that the town council has to act within 45 days of the hearing date. So once the town council opens their hearing, then they have 45 days to act on it. Because the town council hasn't opened their hearing yet, in my opinion, obviously it should go in front of an attorney just to make sure, but from the way the wording is, I think we're safe with it.
Again, just looking, this is the legislative body, not the planning board. Once
Exactly.
they get, so we're safe there.
And I believe so, but, with respect to the question, I thought we should do
At
it.
least talk about
We do want to get it
Right,
going,
right.
get
Yeah,
this
no, we-
finished, but
we're
we're doing
all-
it in a timely and manner, so.
Right.
Right. Okay, the second bullet point is host community language. We have a submittal from Attorney Monleski, which was very helpful, thank you, Dean. And so maybe we can discuss that in terms of how we want to finesse our way with any language in the document. Third is, we had a lengthy discussion on the mixed-use village district height specifications. And it's my understanding the document that I sent out to all of you after our last meeting reflected what the intent of this body was. However, we just need to review that, make sure I picked up all the bullets, and that we are in the same vein, and then vote to adopt and move forward. Another issue is inclusionary housing. There was a table that was submitted by former applicant or the attorney for a, future applicant, let's put it that way. That was helpful in terms of the timeline for inclusionary housing, and so we had that to discuss. Also, any definitions that we might need with that particular use. Then there is the issue of section 3.053, live, work, space versus home office. We need to determine what the parameters are between the two, and are they in conflict with one another, or do they support one another? And once we know what we're doing, is it a yes or a no for a use? And then if so, then we need to define the use, and perhaps it requires some criteria. And also, if we agree that it belongs in the bylaw, it needs to be placed under commercial uses for the mixed-use village district on that table. And the last thing is the frontage for the mixed-use village district. We still have to talk about that. That's all I have. So Don, it's up to you.
Okay. I think, let's go right off the bat. I think let's go into the heights. I'm gonna take it slightly out of order. Let's do height
It doesn't
specific-
matter, it doesn't
Let's do
matter.
height specifications.
Okay,
How's
okay.
that?
Perfect.
All right. Everyone has a copy of the draft that Marilyn sent, and with the understanding of height specifications on there. This is the version I have.
The draft, correct?
Okay, it would be, I'll show you the
Yeah.
version. It's one,
Yes.
okay, all right.
All right, and this one has 4.4, the maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village shall reflect, and I can read it further, except for all residential zones, maximum height up to 35 feet. B, commercial and business zones, maximum height up to 40 feet. Golf rec, maximum height up to 35 feet. Industrial garden, industrial and industrial garden, maximum height up to 50 feet.
We're also talking peaked roofs.
Actually, in the first lead-in for 4.4, that first couple of sentences, it should, there have been some changes in that language a little bit. The maximum height of structures within a mixed-use village district shall reflect the zone and the surrounding context where the district is to be created. Such height requirements are as follows, and as further defined in section 11A, development regulations within this bylaw. So then the height, maximum heights that you just listed follow the zones where the district could be created. And then section 11A, in the spirit and the context of creating a mixed-use village, heights of new buildings shall approximate those of adjacent and existing buildings. Diverse roof styles and heights are encouraged and should complement the surrounding developed environment. Flat roof lines are to be discouraged as they are not in keeping with New England architecture. So that was I assume that's that's how I remember how we discussed it.
Okay. Spirit of a mixed-use village, I'm trying to think of what I can, all right, what do you, any further thoughts on 11A or what was mentioned earlier on heights?
Through the chair.
Please,
I
Connor.
think 4.4 and 11A pretty much summed up exactly what we had settled on at the end of our last meeting. I just wonder, in the first sentence of 11A, should it be mixed-use village district? Or should it just be mixed-use village?
Well, it
as
could
it's
be
written?
mixed-use village district.
Yeah, I don't have a problem adding the word
Right,
district
right.
in there. Is it just fine now?
Otherwise, the rest
Looks fine?
looks fine.
Okay. No other thoughts on it? We're all set? Okay.
Sounds good.
Took that one off.
Do
Go ahead.
we need to vote? I mean, I don't
We
see,
need to
I don't,
adopt this.
I mean, we will vote on the whole document.
Right, I mean,
But,
yeah, I mean, we can take it as a vote if, I don't have an issue one way or the other, because to me, it's, if we have a consensus, I'm okay moving forward with it, but I can do, I'll entertain a motion to adapt the language that, with the word district added in 11.A that was presented by Marilyn in her draft.
So moved.
Motion is made by Connor, is it seconded?
Second.
Seconded by, I'll give Sid credit since it's his birthday. Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that one's off. Let's see what the next one I can, which is gonna be the next one that's not gonna be as challenging.
Let's see.
I'm trying to knock the easy ones off first.
Right, so that was the height.
Inclusion, go to inclusion.
You want to talk about frontage?
All right, let's talk about frontage. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Frontage it is.
Frontage it is.
All right, that would be,
Let's go back to-
let's find the document.
So many
Let's
different
first of
things
all-
going on.
I know, too many documents too. Certainly for the table of uses for the mixed-use village district, if and when we discuss frontage, a change would have to be made there. Let's see. Now, in the industrial garden park, for example, I mean, do we want to follow frontage that is in the district where the zone is created? I mean, in the
No.
zone where the district
No.
is created?
No.
Okay, you
Because
want to have
in my
it?
opinion is we would have the same frontage requirements of an industrial zone. In other words, this would basically be an overlay district. I think we need to create, we can be inspired by, but I think we should
Okay,
actually
okay.
state it. Because if it's straight industrial, there's no requirement, right?
Okay.
So this is something we can do.
I have a, oh, here it is. Just for the sake of discussion,
So industrial garden park right now is a 250-foot frontage, where industrial doesn't have a frontage
Right.
requirement.
Exactly.
But the industrial garden park would have had the 250 feet.
But if we adopted a general policy that if they want to put one on the underlying one, in theory, we would be in a zero frontage situation for a project like this.
we received
Except there's no industrial property in town without frontage.
Hypothetically, let's say somebody rezones an industrial property off of Chestnut Street,
Yeah,
for instance,
exactly.
for the sake of discussion, you know?
Where's that?
No. Hypothetically.
We received an article called Designing and Building Mixed-Use Centers in the Suburbs. And I found this to be very helpful. It came from Miss Connie, and it really sort of pinpointed some of the things that we're trying to do here. At-
Point of order, I don't know if the people who are watching this are aware who Miss Connie is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
I don't, do you
you
want, as out of respect,
So you
first
might
of
want
all.
to refer to me as the Planning and Community Development Director so that people know what my
I'm
function
sorry, Ms.
is.
Connie is the planning and unit development. I am so sorry, because
like the preschool
we call
teacher.
each other by their first names.
No,
Everyone knows who you are.
I don't know, not necessarily, so.
Exception accepted.
So, and
Yeah.
thank you for calling me Miss Connie instead of Madam.
Oh,
You know,
gosh.
you know.
Actually, that stems from working in your office with you when Catherine was
Yeah, I
there,
know,
and I
she called me Miss
helped put all the packets together, and we
know.
called you Miss Connie.
I know.
So it's a term of endearment, and
And it's
you know.
taken as so, but I think
Okay.
people out there may not know who's
Okay.
this strange woman.
we received this wonderful document from the Director of Planning and Community Development, Connie Broaders. And in the document, there is a section that addresses drive-by traffic. And it says mixed-use centers of all sizes rely on drive-by traffic. The smaller the project, the more essential it is to have excellent visibility to impulse shoppers. Larger centers are more likely to have anchors and a mix of destination-type stores. Small town centers without anchors are the riskiest, and if they don't have visibility to traffic, then they shouldn't even be considered. So I just felt that was so important, because we did discuss if it's buried behind a wonderful landscape, people are gonna drive by. They may think it's an apartment complex, but they may not think that there are retail opportunities there. So that's just a suggestion.
No, that's a fair point, and I think with the setbacks that we have in place, that it keeps in the spirit of it. I mean, you think of one example could be, what's that, Evergreen Walk down in Connecticut?
South Windsor.
South Windsor, yeah,
Right.
that's set back a little bit, but at the same time.
But they have visibility from the road,
Exactly,
right.
exactly, so you can have some degree of balance, and I think with the setbacks we have in there, I believe we're okay with that.
Okay.
But on the frontage, what do we suggest on frontage? 250, like industrial garden, keep that consistent throughout, matter whether it's placed in.
Okay, devil's advocate, what would be the advantage of 250? What would be the disadvantage of having 250?
That's a great question, let's think about that.
Well, we just talked about a good advantage as you're driving by.
Visibility?
It gives you a longer area to look and see the different shops and all in there.
Okay.
And that piece is critical to a balance of a mixed-use development.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have it, I don't wanna set someone up for failure. I just think exposure is important.
Right.
So on the next negative would be you drive by and you see all the shops in there. It all depends on your perspective. It all depends on the development. Like I said, if the development's done beautifully and all, you don't mind seeing it. Like I said, it depends on if they do a parking lot in between the buildings and the frontage, depending on how far back the buildings are set.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's gonna come down to the site plan. Like I said, there's pros and cons both ways on it.
What do you think, Connor?
I could see the value of having something, I just wouldn't want the number to be too high, and I'm not sure what too high
Yeah.
is at this
It's-
point.
It's, it's subjective, I guess. I look at the mixed-use developments I've visited, and generally, they are more, in reality, this kind of use is created for more urban areas than rural residential, so that's why we struggle. But the one that I remember visiting was in Westboro, and, they're right on the main street. However, you can see them, but you can see through some of the setback what's there. And, in terms of frontage, it's probably close to 200 feet.
Well, when you're talking frontage also, you could have a development that has frontage on several sides, a few main
Depends on the
streets.
location,
Yeah,
sure.
location.
Right.
I'm gonna ask a quick question, I'll put, Connie, any thoughts? I
Connie,
know, but
she's the
I know, but she's already been introduced.
Okay,
And she
all
can
right,
call
so
me
we
Don,
both-
she doesn't have to call me
We're gonna be real
Chairman
sensitive.
Anderson or anything like
No,
that. Any thoughts from the planning perspective as to appropriate frontage for this type of bylaw? Is 250 arbitrary? Was there any bantering about in your deliberations to get this to us of a appropriate frontage?
Well, thank you for asking, Mr. Chairman, because when we think in terms of a mixed-use development, we think of a driveway entrance, so the frontage becomes not as critical as if you were creating a standalone building. Don't forget, you're actually putting buildings on that interior roadway, which is privately maintained, privately owned. The town typically doesn't take ownership or maintenance. So what you are probably more concerned about is the size of the parcel as opposed to the frontage. And you've already discussed the size of the parcel. I wouldn't be so hung up on the frontage.
The reason it ties into what Marilyn was mentioning earlier was that information you shared with us on talking about a project will have a higher likelihood of success, which benefits the town as well, because nobody really ever wants a project to fail once it's been approved, is by having some type of street visible. And if we do not have a frontage requirement, you could have a narrow lot frontage entering to a much larger piece that's buried in the back, and so forth. Am I tying in the two issues
yeah.
as well? So I'm just trying to resolve both the suggestion from the planning, that planning paperwork, as well as this one. So maybe there is a validity to have some frontage in order to allow it to have a better chance of success?
Well, just be mindful of, in example, Evergreen, you have signage that directs you to the business.
Okay.
So you are going to have some sort of monument signage, something that's tastefully, aesthetically complementing
Right.
the design and the development of the mixed-use village district. So folks are going to know through the signage that, oh, when we go in, we're going to see, and it doesn't have to list all the specific businesses, but you could say retail, commercial. In many cases, though, there's some sort of directional signage that, in the form of a ground mount monument type of signage, not a high aerial signage, but, you know, something, again, that introduces you and invites you in, so that people know that through this gateway, you enter business as well as residential.
Excuse me, through the chair. So basically, the Elms, for instance, you kind of have a stretch before you get to actually the residential area. So,
True, that's correct. And we don't have, there's not a requirement.
okay,
That is a residential development, though, it doesn't have any mixed use.
correct.
So, you know, I think that
And
was.
you did have your boutique there.
It's not allowed.
I know, but it's something like that. You-
Right, I understand, right.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
I see Ralph's
So,
about to say
through the chair,
something.
well, I'm
Yeah.
just thinking, no
I
matter
saw your
what,
eyes.
you still have to have the right of way for the private way to go in, which is
50,
50
50, 20
50
by
to
law.
60, something like that.
You know, 50 by,
Like you said, well, I mean, for a driveway, it's 20 feet, I believe, but obviously that wouldn't work in this situation. So if we have 60 feet, yeah, for signage on the sides, I mean, my thought would be no less than 150, which is like a resident A. I believe that's 140 is residence A.
And
as
one
frontage.
seventy-five, I think, is
And
double.
175 is
Right.
double A. At least that gives them a little room on the sides. Obviously, this petitioner doesn't fall
You
into
have to
this, but
figure
I'm
there's
just
gonna be
saying.
tractor trailer deliveries, there's gonna be also tie-ins to the streets, so they're gonna be, you have to have at least enough frontage for running appropriate easements and hopefully areas where it's not gonna cause a disruption in getting traffic to and from. I
Are
mean,
we
if you have-
getting too
yeah.
technical on this? I mean,
Well, I
No, no,
guess-
no, I'm
well-
just saying at a practical level. In other words, let's say you have a very narrow visual street here, and you have to run everything, here's the frontage, and you have to run everything underneath this, and you have all these people living, working, playing back here. And so now there's damage or work that needs to get done. You've effectively blocked the area in and out of the place. So by having more frontage, you now can run easements, utility
Along the sides, yeah.
on the side and over here, so if there isn't repairs that need to get done, it's not in some narrow area that's gonna so I think there's a public safety matter with having this percentage of population, 10% of the voting population in East Long Meadow potentially could be living back there, and having a narrow frontage that could be impeded by something, pothole, damage, whatever. And now how do you get these people in and out? How do you get, so I think you need, for a practical point of view, having some frontage.
my
And what is
biggest
that number?
My biggest concern would be public safety with the fire department.
Exactly.
So I would defer to them.
Well, and I think site plan is gonna address those kinds of things. There's maybe a service entrance for those kinds of deliveries. And I think we're getting too
Yeah.
But-
caught up in.
But if we don't have the frontage,
Exact number.
then let's say there's a piece of land similar to the old Lombardi property over on Elm. Very narrow frontage, so now you get in there, you open up this whole area. You, by limitation, unless you buy rights from an abutter or something, you're limited in and out on this narrow frontage area. So I think we need, from a practical point of view, is to having some type of appropriate frontage that public safety can wrap themselves around and say, yeah, this is fine. I'm thinking, does it hurt to say 250, similar to industrial garden?
Through the chair, are you,
Please.
and maybe if you clarify that you would like to see 250 so that you could have more than one ingress and egress. Is that why you're looking for more than
Not
250?
for, yes, I'd say 250 for, service entrance, but also that you don't have everything in utilities, sewer damage, water damage, pipe burst. You don't have to rip up the street that people are coming in and out of these people effectively are trapped in there. If we have a narrow entranceway on this piece, unless,
Well, there's gonna be a restaurant there, so they can sit at the bar.
yeah, but how can they get their liquor deliveries,
But I
That's
think,
it.
and I think here again, we're looking at the design of the project, which is subject to the application and the planning board. You could even have a separate entrance that is gated with a ticket, with a card for the residents to get to a certain
It
portion of the
provided
development.
the land lends itself to that.
And I agree
And if
we
we
need
have a
frontage.
narrow frontage, you can't do it unless you get the neighbors over here to allow that emergency access way. You know?
So, again, through the chair, if I
Yes.
may, let's think of a larger subdivision that is one point of entry, where you have there are several in
Right.
town that end in cul-de-sac. So, granted, there are single-family residential dwellings, they're not mixed use, but I think that, and using this particular parcel as an example, they happen to have they have frontage all along the road. Probably aren't going to have too many parcels that are 40 acres,
That's a good
20
point.
acres.
Right, so,
So if you're going to stipulate that you need 175 feet of frontage,
yeah.
you may not get there anywhere else, and suddenly you're not able to use your mixed-use village zoning anywhere else but there.
Well,
So.
you could have a situation where somebody wants to put in a project and that person
50
buys the
to 75,
abutting
150 to
house.
175.
If a project of this magnitude somewhere else, they can pick up, buy house A, access to the land, level house A, and create the area in there.
Well, that's not always wise, and I've seen that done before, I've seen that happen on more than one occasion with new subdivisions
the
all
different-
over the world.
The
I mean, not
difference
over the
between the
world.
cul-de-sac subdivisions, of course, we have like 900-foot maximum, you have to get a planning board waiver to go past that. But the difference between that and a project of this is, and I can see from owning a business in town and seeing the impact of commercial delivery simply to a Dunkin' Donuts and what it does to the paving and the parking and so forth. You're not likely in a small subdivision to get the level of repeat vehicle traffic and deliveries and so forth. Yes, you may get the occasional Amazon and FedEx deliveries and maybe Stop and Shop pods coming down your street. But this is gonna have a lot more bigger vehicles doing deliveries on here. And I think from a point of view is create something, whatever this number is, wide enough that if you do have to make repairs to the street, you have a way to get out.
Through the
So-
chair.
Okay, go ahead, Sid.
And looking, Marilyn just looked at the chart. What, double A is 175? That would provide adequate entrance, exit,
Yeah.
Room on the sides, everything.
room on the sides.
Because we typically, what, 6 streets are what, typically
So-
60 feet?
Well, and plus, we
Or
do
easement?
know that there are other parcels in town that are currently being suggested to be subdivided into some 40-acre parcels. So, and the focus of this bylaw has been to be sensitive to where this might be someplace else in town and not just in the industrial garden
Right.
park. So 175 would fit to the zone that these parcels are
So
located.
that would be the minimum.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would, we have to vote, but that would
I
be
know, but
my-
your thoughts, Connor? 175 would be an appropriate minimum?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking like 150, but I guess 25 feet doesn't make that much of a
Maybe the park
difference.
benches.
So I make a motion that we set the frontage at a minimum of 175 feet.
Second.
Okay. Motion is made by Ralph, seconded by Sid for a 175 minimum frontage. Not hearing any other discussion unless I'm missing out. I'm gonna call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed, motion carries.
All right,
5-0.
I will make an adjustment to table 3-2 for mixed-use village district, minimum frontage, 175.
Okay, let's see, what's the next of our hot thing that we can go into and maybe take off our list?
Let's talk about
A live workspace?
All right, let's go over it. I'll go to that. Live and workspace versus home office. 3.053 versus home office. Let me go over it.
And I have a quick question on this too.
Okay.
Currently, our tax rate is single tax rate. If we ever go, God forbid, to a split tax rate, will this home office slash live workspace then be taxed at a split rate, a portion of the space?
The other question is gonna be, from a practical point of view, and this is as a real estate attorney, is if you're buying a business, is it for a business, and then you end up selling the condo later, are you selling a commercial property? You know,
Or better yet, on our percentages,
yeah,
does it count towards the commercial aspect of it?
I would say that we have to be, I think by home, I think the live, work, and play, I believe there's gonna be an area, I mean, people are gonna have, everyone has laptops, I mean, I would say, that's a given. And on a bad day, I think just about all of us would work from home, and I don't think any of us are working from home are necessarily gonna be taking out a tax deduction, and calling it a home office, and so forth, so that, I would say that the type of live, work, and play is, I don't think people are gonna be operating in and out businesses, like you're gonna see John Smith, and then John Smith, psychiatrist services or something, and seeing patients in there and things. At least, is that the vision? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know
What do you
that we
think?
can say that that wouldn't happen, or why we wouldn't want that to happen.
Can we say a
Our
max?
home office allows a certain amount of that.
Yeah, it needs
And I
our
think
current bylaw.
Can we
Leave our
say?
current bylaw the way it is.
Yep, or can we say a certain amount of the living space can only be used up to, say, 30% of the living space can be used as office space? Something like that.
I found it, okay.
Okay,
We got a definition that the Director of Planning and Community Development provided for us back at our request a while ago, because the feeling was, what are we talking about in terms of a live-work unit? And the information that we received was a live-work unit is defined as a single unit, for example, studio, loft, or one-bedroom, consisting of both a commercial/office and a residential component that is occupied by the same resident. The live-work unit shall be the primary dwelling of the occupant. And then, now this particular definition came from another community. It doesn't matter where it was, but this community crafted some criteria with which, you know, the commercial component is designed on the floor plan approved through the special development permit, the residential component as designated on the floor plan. So I mean, there are restrictions within the use. And I mean, what we received from the original document was just a use in our table of uses with nothing. And historically, the planning board has in these special uses created some criteria. So I don't know if this is a road we want to go down. Is this beyond the scope of what we're doing here? Should the planning board have given us more information, or should we request the planning board to give us more information?
Should the planning board handle this?
Well, that's what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to shirk our responsibility in this, but as we know, this project has grown with everything we've talked about. So, you know, I'm happy to do whatever we do, but the point is, I don't feel that a definition and a use is enough.
So I think we can create our own bylaw for the mixed-use district without putting the home occupation into it. And then at a later date, if they so choose to add that in, they'll bring basically a bylaw change, tell what districts it's allowed in, and do it separately. We already offer the home office 20% of the dwelling can be used as an office, this and that. We have criteria in the bylaws. And then, like I said, if they so choose to change later, I mean, obviously, anyone can make a bylaw suggestion amendment and bring it forward.
Again, for new viewers, we are voting on we're working on a proposal from the planning board that was sent to us. However, the original impetus was from the developers. So I'm gonna ask John or Joe, who are representing the developer, the original, the developers here. You're marketing the project, and let's say you're marketing a mixed use and you're marketing a non-mixed use, okay, project. The use, a single-family dwelling within the mixed use versus a single-family dwelling and a larger condominium or apartment. Are you marketing in the mixed use to a potential resident that they can do more things within the four corners of their unit than they could in a separate, standalone, non-mixed use project that you also are marketing?
Only if we create it. So, we don't have a live workspace in our portfolio currently.
Okay.
And to be clear, this came out of planning, this didn't come from us. So, because it came from planning, we looked at it. And do we think there is an opportunity for it? Yes, we do. I think whatever it would be limited. Mainly because you need to get, you can only really do it on the ends of the mixed-use buildings because you need wall frontage to be able to, like, do a bedroom. So, it's very difficult to do it in the midline of a building because what you would want for your storefront are also the windows that you need for a bedroom. So they kind of conflict against each other. You could do it, but it's just more difficult to do it in the midline. So we were only thinking of it because planning suggested it. It could go either way. I think it has value. We've sat, and again, we've been blessed to having sat through a lot of planning board meetings, and there's a lot of folks that have come in with for planning board approval for things that are, they're basically home
offices.
Home uses. They're not all offices. The furniture finishing woman. I remember, she's would be a perfect example of something that, sure, if you put together a live workspace that had a garage and a showroom and a living area, that would be something that would work. But again, they're niche things. They're going to satisfy a couple of square feet.
I'm glad I asked that question.
And
Yeah.
it's helpful, through the chair, would you, if you had such an opportunity, would you incorporate whatever percentage that little piece amounted to the overall, 15% requirement for commercial / retail / non-residential component?
We had thought we would only because that was where it was put in the table of uses. It was put in the commercial side of the table of uses. So we said, okay, it's commercial use, so we'll count it in there. Again, very limited. If you ended up with 3 or 4 of these things, or 4 or 6 of these things, I'd be surprised. Maybe they're 1,000 or 2,000
Story
each.
building, wouldn't this be the same as I own a business on the first floor, I run my business, I walk upstairs to the second floor where I live? It's pretty much the same concept, isn't it?
It is the same concept if that's in one unit.
Right.
It has to be one unit.
Yeah.
Right.
I still-
That could work.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That would
In a
work.
development like this,
Right.
if you're doing apartments above, I lived in the apartment and
Right.
walked downstairs, it pretty much ends up being,
That,
you're living and you're working in the same.
that's the scenario we thought of if and when we think of doing a, kind of like a separate building that is a live-work building.
Yep.
That's probably how we do it. We would have a live-work building that had all the commercial garagey type things at the ground and then units above that connect it. 'Cause- and again, I hate to say, you plan by Google
Yes,
anymore.
yes, Joe.
Just to talk about the live, work, play concept, it was really out of a marketing concept that came out to give people that it was a lifestyle. And it was when more people were telecommunicating
Yeah.
and working from home, that's where the concept came from. It wasn't that people were opening businesses necessarily to live above, next door, within. But it did come about that people were starting to do more work from home, and then the entrepreneurial stuff where people were starting
Right,
businesses
right,
from home
Right.
developed from that concept
Right.
of live, work, play.
Okay, I kind of, now I have a much clearer focus and the way I see it. I don't think we necessarily need to touch the live, work, play in this bylaw, and hear me out on this one. We already just heard from the likely developer to say that this would be a minute, very specific to a certain smaller percentage of units. Number two, we already have, and if we want to take on tweaking that, we can, but I don't think it's necessarily in our purview at the moment. We already have a home use business office bylaw
Right.
that has been modified and tweaked over time, and it seems to be fairly effective. And it would apply, I would think, to the residential units here. So for every one of these type of businesses that want to have a home office per se, I think the idea would be to maybe pick up some real retail space, and then somewhere in the project have their residents there too, if they want to do that. Otherwise, to suggest that everyone's home could be used for business purposes, I think creates confusion, and I think we already do have enough safeguards and protections in our bylaws, and I don't think it's but that's just me talking. I want to hear what you guys have to say.
No, through the chair, after listening to what John had to say, if we do this, if the planning board is interested in doing this, we need to have some standards in place. Just as you said, they need to be corner units. I mean, anything needs to be respectful for the residents that are not in a live-work-place environment. And, you can get all kinds of information online, and there are pros and cons to everything. So if the town would be interested in this, just as this document that we were given, there's 13 basically conditions based on this particular community. And I would say, I would be in favor of not addressing it in this document right now.
So be it.
All right.
I mean, that's my opinion.
All right, so again, just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm just gonna entertain a motion, and then that motion, I guess I'll make it, see if it's seconded, is that the live, work, and play does not need to be, that it needs to be addressed in this review of the bylaw, proposed bylaw, because of, it's been addressed through our current bylaws under a home office, and would merely create confusion as to allocation as to business percentages and so forth.
Can we just say to the effect that the mixed-use bylaw will adhere to the current bylaws of the town for the office space?
Okay, say it in the positive, I like how you think. All right, so I'll second your motion. Or how, all right.
And how was that motion again?
This motion saying that the
Mixed-use
matter's
bylaw.
already been addressed in the current bylaw.
As to home office
As
too.
to home office space.
So, in the proposal submitted to us under 3.053,
Yeah,
in the table,
we have to,
it says live workspace.
We'll remove that.
we're gonna have to
And they
remove
were adding it
that.
under special permit. So what we're actually voting on is to remove that.
Correct.
Right, because we have, so just
Good for you.
cross off 3.05,
3.053.
053.
Right. Well, was the motion seconded? We had so much
All
back
right.
and forth.
Yes.
Town seconded.
Yeah.
Okay, now we need further discussion.
All right, further discussion. So in essence, what the motion is, as clarified by Ralph, is the effect of this is to remove from the table of uses, which is not there right now, it's been as part of a proposal, is to remove, including 3.053, live, work, and space. and the definitions, and so forth. Marie, I'm trying to read it, but else am I missing anything?
That's all we have.
That's all we
What's right
have,
there.
okay.
All the rest was,
All right.
was subjective.
So
was
that's the
discussion.
consequence of it. All right, any other discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll call a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. All right, so that, okay, now we've got another one knocked off. All right, so, host or inclusionary? Want to do inclusionary?
Well, yeah, sure.
Sure, let's do inclusionary on here. Got some good reading while we've been away, both from Maryland and also from Connor, who picked up the Smart Growth Toolkit and gave some draft language on inclusionary zoning bylaw. I think we'll, trying to see how you want to focus on this one.
Let me, well, originally, we had discussed through the chair, and the only reason I'm jumping in was because I worked on the table that I sent out to all of you soon after the last meeting, and that was where where I thought we could add it to the table as to how a developer would facilitate the 10% of affordable units per 100 complete residential units in any project. And so that's what's there. It's section 2.13, to provide additional mixed-use housing to include inclusionary housing at a ratio of 10% affordable units per 100 complete residential units according to the following schedule. And it was submitted by the proposed developer as well as their attorney, thank you, Jane, for 0 to 24% of residential units would not have any affordable. Then when you get to 25% of the residential units, then you would focus on 10% affordable. 50%, then 50%, 75%, 75% of the affordable ratio. And then when you get to 90% of the residential, you're focusing at 100% of the affordable, which is 10 per 100 units. And in 480, come on,
Yeah, I
Marilyn.
think it's 480, right?
It would be, as I say, 10 units per 100 residential units. So, that was, this I didn't make up, I just recopied it, because we asked for it. So, it's up to you folks whether you think this is helpful and want to include it in the bylaw.
And using these ratios doesn't put the town in any type of jeopardy for a exposure to a comprehensive permit while we're waiting, right? So the first 24% of the project can be built without any affordable units, and then as it gets past that, then they start having to, then it kicks in. Is that what I'm reading?
Well, yeah, and I think from a business perspective, it is, it's only right, it's only fair.
Oh, it
that
is, I
they
just wanna
get
make sure
things-
that there's not an unintended effect that we, during that first phase, that we're gonna be in any
Right.
type of exposure, or will the state consider, listen, you already have a plan in place for this, and that we're not putting ourselves into a comprehensive permit exposure innocently because of these numbers? I'm just asking,
I wouldn't think
Connor's
so.
next, yep.
Just because that, a very similar table was in there, like the state's own proposed inclusionary zoning bylaw. So I
Yeah.
would think that if they found that acceptable as a template, that.
but they're also very,
similar.
they're very, and that inclusion, the bylaw also is, I believe, any subdivision of land of 10 or more units, which is far more aggressive than we have, and I'm not prepared to go to that level.
No, I didn't think that this document was, this
Yeah.
is more of a comprehensive,
Sure,
like, whole town thing,
understood.
but I thought that there were certain sections that were interesting.
And I think that's ultimately what we all got from that, and, I thank you for that. For the record, Ralph and I had a conversation with Larry Smith, who was the interim director of planning, who is associated with the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, who picked up the slack after Robin passed away before Connie Broaders came to East Long Meadow. And we discussed the issue of inclusionary zoning in a bylaw because we are required, we have a regional fair share, and we have folks in town who want to stay here. We're not talking about large developments, we're just looking at a way to encourage some more affordable development. And it was interesting, coming from a Pioneer Valley Planning Commission person, if you will, that while the bylaw is well-meaning, a bylaw such as this, which any development would be subject to a certain percentage of affordable, while the bylaw is well-meaning, it became somewhat of an administrative nightmare because the communities were responsible for
Screening.
regulating this process. I mean, we experienced it with the council experienced it. I wasn't on the council when we had a unit for sale in Benton Estates that was an affordable unit. And previously, in our other form of government, we had the Housing Partnership, who governed the lottery that handled applications from folks in East Long Meadow to be able to provide an opportunity for an East Long Meadow resident. And we don't have that in place now. And so that particular opportunity, and I'm not sure where it went, counselors, I don't know what you remember, but I believe it went to a state agency it was filled appropriately by a needy, a person eligible, but it was a different process.
If I may, through the chair, so applications come into, we're made aware of the unit that is going to be on the market by the owner.
Okay,
And then what is supposed to happen is that information is sent to the Department of Housing and Community Development.
all right, so that's.
So that's the process.
Right.
So then DHCD, if we do not have a buyer within the town, there should be a list maintained by the housing director of people who might be interested.
Who's
in-
that?
Who's that?
Lynn Booth. So
So the housing authority?
the housing authority.
Okay.
All right,
Right.
okay.
So she should, or maybe she does not, but people who are interested in moving to the town that would like to purchase an affordable unit, typically, that's where the list is maintained in other communities. And so I let her
Thank
know
you.
that we
Yeah.
had, because in their deed, there's a deed restriction that says if you're going to be selling, you have to
Right,
let.
right.
So we let her know, and we also let the town council know, and DHCD know. And what happened most recently with one of the units was that there was nobody in the town that was interested in purchasing. It went to a broker that falls under the umbrella of DHCD, and they listed that property. So that's the
Thanks,
process.
thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So, anyway, that's
Joe.
it.
A question, this will have language in here that'll be for the residents of East Long Meadow
You're, where,
about affordable housing?
are you talking about the
The
definitions?
qualifications for people to have the applications for the affordable piece.
That's a good question. Can we?
Well,
can we-
and that's right, because
Yeah.
I have some questions about
Because it
even
doesn't
just-
say that, I wanna
No.
make sure that, and within that language, are you gonna be people that would have preference for it? So the question I would ask is if for senior citizens, that you would set aside a certain percentage, like maybe 50% of that. Veterans would have the opportunity to apply, there'd be set aside for veterans, and maybe a set aside for people that are public servants, like your fire department, and for teachers, a combination of household income, that there's a set aside for them.
And that's a good point, because,
So they have a
right.
preference.
In my thinking, would this be suitable as part of a host community agreement, where you're, I mean, it's important, I think, for the community, if we're making this change to try to meet our regional fair share in some
Right.
fashion, that we be able to
We wanna make sure that
document
serving
what we're doing, and
Yeah.
then basically serving the folks in the
residents of
immediate
East Long
area.
Meadow.
So, the question is,
I think we should keep it apart from the host community agreement. I mean, we can reference it, but I think it should be in a standalone.
as
within
part of the
it,
bylaw.
As part of the bylaw, because I think what we need to explore a little further is whether we can, and and again, this is a first instance for the town of East Long Meadow of trying to create an inclusionary provision in our bylaws, is to see whether we can do a weighted application approval process. Can it be, preference will be given to East Long Meadow residents, preference will be given to seniors, preference will be given to first responders who are servicing East Long Meadow or a surrounding community, preference will be given to veterans and things of that nature. Can that be done? Has that been done? And how do we get that language?
Through the chair, if I
Yes,
may,
Connie.
you're treading on fair housing laws, and
Well-
I probably would advise you not to do that. I also would suggest that as the zoning board of appeals is the governing authority, you may want to hold off on this particular discussion at this time and maybe gather some information through Mark McLean, who is our chair of the ZBA. The ZBA is currently updating their policies and procedures manual, taking into special consideration Chapter 40B. So this area is an area that could it could actually be more sensitive than what you perceive is being discussed at this table right now. You might want to ask for a level of expertise from, again, the ZBA chair, based on his policy and
Well, I
procedure
have a
guidelines.
call into Attorney Begline on another matter, so I can probably dovetail it with talking to him about this as well.
Yes.
So are you saying that we should pull away from any reference to inclusionary zoning at this time in this document?
I'm saying that you might want to reserve the verbiage
Okay.
until you have input from legal or other planning professionals that have a level of expertise in
Okay.
incorporating
That's a
the
thought.
inclusionary zone.
Maybe I'll invite Attorney Begline to our next meeting.
I think
see
that
if
would
he's
be
available.
terrific.
I've talked to Attorney Levine, who was on the Board of Selectmen when, I believe it was
We
the
were on the
Benton
board
Estates.
together, right.
And I know he has some great information with regards to this and the process, and I know that had language in it that it would be the children of residents of the town or residents of the town would receive a preference before it goes out, but he's got better language than what I do. And there was a procedure for it when we had the Board of Selectmen, and I think it would be great to find out what we had done in the past and then what we can do in the future, because obviously laws change
Well, you
constantly.
guys are making my life easy, because I have a call into Attorney Levine
I
on
knew that.
another matter, and I can dovetail this. This is gonna be a great conversation. Hey, give me a little detail if I talk to Larry, when did you, give me a little history on this.
Actually, a conversation between me and him came up with regards to the unit that came up for sale
Right.
at Benton Estates.
Okay. And how long ago was this conversation?
When the unit came up,
Like a year ago?
Well, it was,
I
it
don't
was,
even-
it was, I wasn't on the council, so it was at least 6 months to a
Okay.
year.
yeah.
Yeah.
And,
No.
and in that, there was discussion of using certain standards or certain criteria?
You can ask him as far as, because I know what he had said was that the thought process was to give preference to residents of the town before it was opened up.
Okay, okay, I'll add that to my list, thanks. All right, so am I now pushing inclusionary to a future meeting?
Yes.
Am I, all right,
We need more.
so we cannot finish that one.
We have one.
Almost.
Well, no, I think
No,
the,
anyway, any help, we really.
no,
need it,
I think the
because
base, I think you're rock solid on your base premise of your 10%.
It's
You're
how
rock
you
solid
allocate it.
on your,
Yes.
on your, phasing schedule. Massachusetts clearly follows New Jersey, as fortunately or unfortunately, most states do in affordable housing matters. I think you're solid there. I think on the implementation of this preference issue, it is a huge fair housing issue. So like, I'll give you the New Jersey example. In New Jersey, actually, Jack and Joe, my principals, were instrumental in getting the law changed to allow for a veteran's preference. And it's a veteran's preference in terms of you can offer the units exclusively to veterans for a short period of time before they're opened up to the overall. And in any of these preferences, whether they be veterans or teachers or public servants or first responders, for example, in New Jersey, we didn't get any of that. We didn't get teachers or first responders in the law. So that had to fall by the wayside. We literally only got veterans. But it's only for a short period of time, so it's like,
Right.
90 days, you can offer it to veterans first, and, until it goes out to the public at large. And in any event, it never exceeds 50%. So any of these set-asides, whether it be senior or, it never exceeds 50%.
Never exceeds 50%.
So, 50% always has to be out to everybody out to everybody in the region, et cetera, open to everybody. So, so what you've done so far, I think you're rock solid on. I think it's some of this implementation of the marketing that we're working on, and I think that is a perfect, thing to be in a host community agreement or, in an implementation document that doesn't need to be in your bylaw.
So I think the thrust, what we're hearing is, as he said, we're rock solid, his opinion, with the 10% and the schedule. And, we all know that a 40B or a 40R has to go before the zoning board of appeals. We're not dealing with that here. We're just trying to do something, within our community. So maybe you could redefine when you're talking with Larry or Mark Beglane about the preference piece. Because that would be a nice touch if we could do that.
Right. Through the chair.
Joe.
Yes, Joe?
The same thing is that I had a lot of experience writing the Affordable Act from New York City, so I can speak to those. We had about 10 different income bands that we were able to drill down to. So that's why I throw that out, saying that you can look into it. I don't know about Massachusetts law, but we followed the federal guidelines in making those units available.
Okay.
Could you send us a copy of of what you did in New York City?
Sure.
Okay.
That'd be
I
very helpful. Thank you.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Through the chair.
Yes, Connor?
I think I agree with all of that. My only one outstanding question on the inclusionary stuff is, like in that toolkit one, they did make mention of like having, like bonuses, like if you exceeded the threshold that we wanted. Is that something that we want to consider? Like if they voluntarily went above the 10% that we require?
I don't think so, and the reason I'm gonna respond so is because it's kind of because there's this moving target set up here, their percentage and so forth, so they may have it increased. Let's say they happen to, and when they hit the 25, they end up at 13%. Well, that only moves this number, the 50% number, when they hit 50%, a little south of it. So I think, if the whole entire project is done, and let's say they're at 13% and stuff, and if for whatever reason there's a justification to expand it, and assuming that's within the purview, then maybe we can revisit at that time. But I don't, as long as this is a moving target, percentage-wise, I don't think we can offer bonuses on the onset. I think if they're gonna make that decision based on marketability of the project,
Well,
right?
Actually, no, the bonus, excuse me, through the chair.
Yes.
The bonuses are typically, they're density bonuses. So if you, say instead of doing 10%, you do 13%.
Okay,
Then you won't get 12 units to the acre, you get 14 units to the acre. And then you have a sliding scale of density bonuses as you include a higher percentage of affordable housing. And frankly, given how hard this committee has worked on your density, you don't need to, you don't need to go there.
You don't want to take over that
You don't need to go there. No. You said it, you're
But
good.
thank you for saying we worked hard on it.
Like you, please, you're good.
keep the numbers as they're numbers.
And that, again, this phasing schedule, it works. It really does. As Ms. Marilyn said, it does let you get a little momentum going for your business purposes, but then you have to hit 10%, and, that number comes, and you're like, no, I need to have affordable units. And then the one that really hits is the 50%. So, where you say, no, I have to really think about how am I, making sure that I have, 24 units that are CO'd and available, at the right time. So, I'm at that point, actually, right now in Cherry Hill, where I'm literally at like 48%, and we have to make sure we get there, so, this scale works.
I have a question.
Yes.
And it's kind of, and I'm not sure how we as a committee feel about it or how we are hoping to finesse our way through it. We've talked about 10% affordable. And we're not, if I understand it correctly, we're dealing with just affordable. We're not looking at low to moderate, we're just looking at affordable. Can we just focus on one aspect? Or is it the whole low to, in other words, low income, moderate, and I don't know if moderate and
You have to follow
affordable are in the.
federal- Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you have to follow the federal guidelines, which you reference in here, I believe.
I did, and I got that definition, because I felt we needed to have some sort of guideline, and whether it's within this document or whether the definition ends up in section 8 of our definitions. Affordable housing units are units which may only be rented or purchased by families or households whose annual incomes adjusted for family size do not exceed 80% of the median income for East Long Meadow as calculated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development or any successor agency, and are eligible and countable for the purpose of the Commonwealth's 40B subsidized housing inventory.
Right. And my understanding of, to be eligible and countable, is if it is, a 30% payment of up to 80% of your median income, that is a qualified unit.
Okay,
So you don't need to go further and say you need X percentage of
Right.
low, or if you're 30% of 80%, you're countable.
okay.
I mean, if you wanna put
Right.
30% in as a payment, that the housing payment does not exceed 30% of 80%, that's great. You can add that sentence, but,
And then I added an additional sentence, median income for East Long Meadow shall be as calculated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development or any successor agency. I just wanna make sure we're treading on proper ground for this, because I want it to work.
nothing, as a planner, I don't see anything that's put you out of bounds there.
Okay.
That's great language, in my opinion. Any other comments, anything?
Just in the definition though of affordable housing, is that second paragraph, like median income for East Long Meadow, is that saying the same exact thing as what the first paragraph said, where it said as calculated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development? It seems like it was just the same thing twice.
Well, you're probably correct. I just, with this, I wanted it understood that it's based on our median income and not,
The regions.
wherever, any other place, because our median income is higher. And,
So 82?
so that's not necessary.
Is this the language, and this is just a
Yeah.
further
Right,
explanation?
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I was, this is the language, and this is just kind of a reflection of that. So I think just having this language in the first paragraph is sufficient, but that just further expounds on it.
So we'll wait on this.
Well, we're waiting on this, but
Yeah.
but if we could, as far as that definition,
Correct.
there's also a definition that I added, housing/inclusionary, housing designed to preserve and promote affordable housing within neighborhoods where zoning has been modified to encourage new development. I don't know if that's helpful, if that's necessary, but, we wanna be as clear as possible,
Correct.
so, whatever.
Yeah, that's one of kind of, it sounds good, I'm just trying to think of the exception to the rule.
So-
Housing that preserve and promote affordable housing within neighborhoods where zoning has been modified to encourage new development.
And which would be this
Zoning.
particular bylaw. The zoning has been modified for that bylaw to encourage new development.
Modified or changed, or does the words can interact with each other? I'm just-
Adjusted.
Where zoning has been created to encourage new development?
I have no problem with that. You know, what's-
Okay. Because modified means you're taking an existing zone and you're
point.
modifying it as opposed to creating a zone, which is what we're doing. So if a zone is industrial and we're turning something else, we've just created a residential zone in the industrial, or a golf zone has been created, has been replaced with that, unless, you know.
Should we just say created or modified, so that, you know, if someone at a future date wanted to, you know, change it so that subdivisions or something had to do with it, they don't have to go back and say, well, we're not creating a new zone for that. It's just modifying it, I don't know.
I don't know, the modifying is,
Have we changed it?
I think, to be truthful, if there were any attempt in that regard, there would be an inclusionary bylaw. Because I don't know, I guess we shouldn't say we can't perceive anything like this, but my feeling would be if there was a real attempt to establish something in our town, that's the way it would go. And that would be a new bylaw that would be created as opposed to modified.
affordable housing within neighborhoods where zoning has been created or see, I'm thinking in terms of modifying zoning. Modifying zoning goes
It
back before us.
implies that it's there.
Yeah, it's
right.
being modified, it's being changed, it's being altered. And that's a bylaw change, to modify a zone. So, you know, I guess we don't have to have a, you know, if we can come up with an answer now, that'd be great, but
I'm
I
sorry.
just have a problem with the word modified.
Forgive me, what was the question?
The question is, Marilyn graciously proposed a definition for inclusionary housing. And that definition in her draft is housing designed to preserve and promote affordable housing within neighborhoods where zoning has been modified to encourage new development. I suggested the word modified be replaced with created, because are we really modifying a zone? Or in this case, we are creating a zone in the matter before us with the mixed-use zone is being created. So what wording do we want to have for, is modified us fine, or do we want to further define it?
Well, generally, you modify a current or an existing bylaw. You modify, you amend, you revise. If you're creating something from nothing.
So
Read that again, Don. Pardon.
housing designed to preserve and promote affordable housing within neighborhoods where zoning has been modified to encourage new development. So let's focus on that. Where
Revised.
zoning has been modified, so we have to
created.
modify a zone.
Why don't you amend the zone? Because you're amending the zone.
That's another word.
The zones are,
We
it's already
usually-
there.
We use amending whenever we're changing a bylaw or an ordinance.
How about this one, really simplify it, where zoning encourages new development. And I already underlined zone, if there's a zone, where zoning encourages new development. Thought, get rid of has been modified to. You see any pitfalls there?
You took the definition from what source?
Actually, it was the Amherst zoning bylaw, section 12.25.
Okay, so why don't we just take a look at a couple of other affordable housing? Why don't we look at a couple of other definitions? Let's just look at Wilbraham, right? Just
No, but this is inclusionary housing. that we're
inclusionary,
talking
I'm
about.
sorry.
Right.
I'm just gonna go to Wilbraham, just because it's our neighbor, and just see.
I wrote that down.
Good research.
Glad, you know, I'm looking at all kinds of stuff, I'm glad I wrote it down.
Let's see.
See if my thing is still recording.
Is it working?
Your battery
Yeah,
dead.
no, my battery's at 76% and we're at an hour and 13 minutes.
Let's start over.
While that's being looked up, quick thought process here, going through Connor's material. One of the things that it brought up was that we want to make sure that any of the inclusionary housing is not separate, that it's, that you can't tell.
It's
inclusion-
integrated,
it's
the integrated, right, right,
Um,
right.
Hey, I thought that was a great idea,
Right,
yeah.
right.
And so,
You know, I think that that's.
how do we put that wording within this? I don't think, I think that's set in there so that, you know, if you have all basement apartments, you can't say, oh, those are, you know, affordable housing, but,
Cellar dwellers.
yeah, I've been
Right,
there.
right, right.
I like,
Well, you
I
know-
mean, that was a great part that they
It's
brought
at
up. and-
Section 5.0, and it said provisions applicable to affordable housing units on and off site. And you'll notice that they do interchange inclusionary and affordable within the same zoning bylaws, FYI.
Yep,
Sitting of affordable units, all affordable units constructed or rehabilitated under this bylaw shall be situated within the development so as not to be in less desirable locations than market rate units in the development, and shall, on average, be no less accessible to public amenities such as open space as the market rate units. So, is that what you were addressing?
Yeah. You know, I guess my experience with that is with Brownstone Gardens, because we have low, moderate, and market rate. And the integration of the units has been, you know, quite successful, nobody knows. I mean, it's just, the units, the look and feel is all very suitable. And that comes, I think, from the management of the facility. But if,
Is that a memorialized policy or just how they run the place? That's what they
I'm
do?
not certain that it's written, I mean, it may be written down somewhere, but it's just how they do business.
Yeah, well, they do a great job. on the site.
And so, you know, if this language is appropriate to put in, you know, I wouldn't have any problem with it. Because we don't know who other developers are down the line.
Correct.
And you know, I don't
Yeah, I
wanna
think
be-
I think I'm really I said I highlighted this language
And I don't wanna
as
live in
well.
the basement.
Okay, so Wilbraham doesn't have a definition for inclusionary,
They do or don't?
They don't.
No,
not within their
okay.
zoning bylaw.
Okay.
Um,
So we'll put a question mark
And
and
see
maybe
where
add
to
that.
place.
That should be in the document, not as, you know, but maybe
Yeah.
under the definition, where
Yeah.
we crossed out
Let me go back into
this piece, where we, you know, we've got the addition, the affordable housing, and I'd like to see that in the document.
Right.
It could go in section 8, but I'd like to see it
Maybe,
in the document.
maybe
Put it
where
right
this
there.
was,
Right,
that
right.
piece that we just, the redundant piece, or explanatory piece, we can replace it with the language in the draft, saying sitting of affordable units, all affordable units shall be constructed. I mean, I think the language there looks pretty good.
I just wonder, I mean, that seems like a standard and condition thing, and I do want it in there, I just don't know if that belongs in the definition, or if that should actually be
I think it should be in the document.
All right, let's find
Right.
find a home for it in the
Right.
document,
I
folks.
think-
Okay.
Well, we added the formula for mixed use, I added the formula, under
you.
2.13, I'm sorry. And we've discussed the formula or the schedule rather, and there does not appear to be any objection to that. Then we move on to the definition of housing affordable, which goes with the schedule above. Why not below housing affordable add the conditions that are applicable to units on and off site, which we got from this document?
All right, so Days,
Mr. Chair.
yes, Connor.
My two thoughts are either right in 2.13, somewhere in there, or it could go under 11, how we have like development regulations for the mixed-use village district, and we could just add a new bullet point G that says, like, you know, the affordable units,
Right.
and then that whole paragraph going there.
So many documents.
Along that same line, just, here's a thought. The language for, housing affordable, that's, the language for housing affordable is defined, is that gonna be part of 2.13, or is that gonna be a standalone that we can just put down, because all it says is purposes in 2. Provide additional housing and to encourage, we can put language to encourage affordable housing as further defined in the regulations for the mixed-use district. Shouldn't that be a little more teeth by putting it, instead of under purpose, put it under regulations, just a thought? A thought, just throwing it
No,
out there.
it doesn't matter. I'm happy to put it wherever you want me to put it, or wherever we all decide to put it. I just felt that because we were dealing with additional mixed-use housing to include inclusionary
Yes,
housing,
No,
just leave it all in that.
Leave it, put some language in 2.13, but then further
Right.
expound on it in creating bullet points in Article 12, or another spot, if somebody has a better spot, in 12, putting, housing affordable and these percentages and so forth as, unless there's another home for it. But the other one, it just seems, it's a good spot, but it seems to be in terms of promoting preamble, like what we're trying to do, and then in the document says, here's how we're gonna do it.
Yeah, I kind of like keeping the percentage table there, because it's consistent with what we, oh, wait a minute. yeah.
It's under a purpose.
Okay, I was looking at 4, not 2.
Okay.
So the
Yeah, I
table
suppose-
will stay at 2.13. Where it is, right, where I factored it in temporarily. 2.13, provide additional housing. So the table will stay there. And then you want me, in terms of the definition for housing affordable, move that under section 11, regulations, and you put a definition in there?
Now, here, I'm just wondering if we can basically somehow use 2.13, create a summary of what we have here in your draft 2.13 in affordable. Provide additional affordable housing through an inclusionary housing bylaw.
If you put it all in writing, I'll be happy to
All
read
right.
it.
I'm gonna work on that one. What I'm
It's-
thinking
it's-
is,
it's tough to
it's just
follow
in
what
terms
you're-
of a
what you're-
drafting point of
yes,
view.
right.
What we're saying, let's take a look. First one, here's what, allow greater variety, reduce traffic. It's like, here's what we wanna do, okay, from a drafting point of view. So nowhere else but in 2.13, if we put that in there, and it just hit me as I'm reading this as a collective here, I highlighted it, but I'm just like, oh, wait a minute. Now, it basically, it goes from, here's what we're gonna do, and then within the document, all these other bullet points, we put down how we're gonna do it. I think 2.13 should be consistent with what we're trying to do, and then somewhere in here, and perhaps the best spot would be under requirements, 12, is to say, here's how we're gonna do it, and here's what the percentages are. Because this would be the only spot that I see that we actually not only state the purpose, but go into more detail on it. Whereas the other ones are just saying, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. And then the document further on says, here's how we're doing this. To provide variety and flexibility, reducing traffic, because we're having a certain design standards and stuff like that. Am I,
No, I like that idea.
yeah, I mean, you see where I'm saying? I'm
Yeah,
saying,
it kind of breaks the flow of like.
yeah, it's like, if I'm making a speech, and I make a speech, and I said, well, in my speech today, I'm gonna talk about government, I'm gonna talk about Town of East Long Meadow, I'm gonna talk about planning, I'm gonna talk about this, purposes. And then in the speech, I say, here's what we're doing about government, Town of East Long Meadow, and planning. So I just think that this is like, here's what we're gonna do as you read this document, future readers of this document. And then in the document, in the language of requirements, actually say how we accomplished or propose to accomplish what our preamble, what our purposes are.
Okay.
Would you, okay, you
You
know,
want me
we
to
all-
work up some language
No,
for you?
I'm just saying, there's been a lot of stuff mentioned here by all of us. Why don't, who's ever interested, jot down some thoughts, send me an email, and I'll try to incorporate it into basically an opening statement, if you will, at 2.13, and then directing whatever thoughts you want to add, which are all important, to, you know, and the table of use, the schedule as well, over to the regulations.
All right, I'll take it.
All right, and then I'll be happy to put that together and then get it all out to everybody,
All right,
so that we all are on the same page.
okay.
And that would include also the language, or we would add over under regulations where we're talking about the schedule and we're talking about the definition for housing affordable. Would that
Yeah.
be over there too?
I think so, unless there's another spot. I just want to move it off the.
I understand
Here's what we're
that.
gonna do. If there's a better
Okay.
spot within the document for it as opposed to 12,
And as well
I'm
as,
game for that too.
and as well as the additional language that we picked up from the inclusionary zoning bylaw regarding the construction rehabilitation of the affordable will be constructed with the same standards as the entire project.
Or, here's another wild thought. Instead of an Article 12, have an Article 13, and assume that's the last one, right?
Yes.
And call it, inclusionary housing provisions, and then we can put it as a standalone there. Or do you rather
And then you
have?
could put the definition in there and the schedule and, sure. You know,
Okay.
I'm certainly open to everything. I just wanna make sure I get all your thoughts down.
Okay, I'm on it. I'll have it for you.
It's a lot of pages, right, look at all this stuff.
Well, no, but this is,
Right,
like I
no,
said,
okay.
Oh, this is important.
yeah, we have to understand is that,
Right,
and remind
right,
ourselves,
right.
when this came to us, that part, there was no discussion of inclusionary in the original draft.
Right.
So this is, you know, what we're doing is we're adding it to the original draft, and perhaps it's important enough to have a standalone on it.
So,
Yes, Ralph?
So where are we?
with that being said, we know roughly what we're looking at, we just
Right.
have to put it in
Right,
place.
Yeah.
Where the puzzle go, where the pieces of the
Basically,
puzzle
they have
go.
two different.
All right, so I'll work on the inclusionary. I do need to talk to Larry and Attorney Levine and Attorney Beglane as well. You want to now move over to host community language?
Before
Or-
we get to there, it's
Yes.
inclusionary and affordable.
It-
We're using them pretty much interchangeable.
You-
I'm sorry, I'm
That's what we were
over
just
listening,
talking,
and I
yeah.
just, I mean,
I was just having that conversation through the chair.
Yes, Joe?
You're kind of using those two terms interchangeably, but they have two different definitions.
Yeah.
So I was asking Jane, why are we having a discussion about inclusionary and affordable?
Well, to me, the concept of inclusionary housing sends a message that we are being inclusive, that we are looking to create an opportunity for affordable housing. So I see where you're coming with that. You and the,
Yeah, just to let you know, Connor shared with us
the inclusionary
the
zoning bylaw.
inclusionary zoning bylaw draft by the Smart Growth, Smart Energy Toolkit bylaw, okay? And within that, they do seem to use,
It addresses affordable housing.
Right.
it addresses affordable housing. Well, so this is an inclusionary zoning bylaw, which speaks to the affordable housing portion of it. I mean, what we're really talking about here is making sure that there's affordable housing
Yeah,
within
you're
this plan.
mandating affordable housing through zoning and say these projects must include affordable housing. So you're not developing an inclusionary zone.
That's
No.
true,
Right.
that's true,
No.
right,
So-
right.
Term inclusionary.
Well, then we don't need a definition for
Yeah, and then we
inclusionary
don't have to-
housing.
Well,
No, go ahead.
we may, like I said, I'm assuming our mixed-use zone, any development is going to be mandated that we have affordable housing within it.
Correct.
So, in essence, that is an inclusionary zone then.
Well, I mean, let's take a look at just that draft smart growth bylaw. Purpose and intent, remember, it is called inclusionary zoning bylaw. So remember that thought. The purpose of this bylaw is to encourage development of new housing that is affordable, and well, they go further to say to low and moderate income households. At minimum, affordable housing produced through this regulation shall be in compliance with General Laws 40B, Section 2024, and other affordable housing programs. So they're using affordable to define within purpose and intent of an inclusionary bylaw. So it seems to be inclusionary means promote affordable housing
In a zone,
in a zone.
right.
Right. That seems to be what it's saying here.
And we are
We want
promoting it within the
affordable
mixed
housing.
use village district.
Right.
Well, we may be promoting it, but we have it, affordable housing
In other places in
and
town.
industrial and also.
But here you
I think
mandated,
let's, yeah,
All right, so.
maybe do away with the inclusionary and just talk about affordable housing within this zone.
within each zone,
Say that?
within each zone that you're
Yes.
creating.
So do a standalone inclusionary zoning or affordable bylaw as a standalone and merely reference that this zone shall be included? That's kind of expanding our scope here.
Yeah, no, we're doing a mixed-use
Confusing
bylaw.
the issues.
Right, exactly, that's why I was kind of making
Within the
sure I'm clear on
mixed-use
this.
bylaw, we're going to have affordable housing.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, I would think we would just use the term affordable in this
housing.
mixed-use bylaw, and then
All right.
reserve the word inclusionary for anything that could come in the future.
So in that little blurb,
we're gonna have
For two.
housing, affordable housing,
right,
and that'll be the subtopic.
Right.
Affordable housing should be number 13. And
right.
then the blurb from Article 5 over here of that draft, which I already set aside, so.
And we won't have a definition for inclusionary housing right now.
Okay, so just stay with affordable, okay. Great.
So you and I will be in touch
Oh, yeah.
to sort of
Like I said,
fine tune this.
I just happen to
And then
have
we'll send it all to
current
you, and you
matters
can chop it all
I'm
up.
dealing with both of the two other attorneys, so
Could you
I'll
put some nice
just bring it
pictures
up.
and stuff on it? I like pictures.
Give us the crayons too.
Maybe a video with it.
All right, okay.
Okay, affordable.
All right. Okay, so I'm on it, and everybody else.
All right, get back to me.
Okay,
I might answer my phone.
maybe not. All right, so on Marilyn's other bullet points.
Actually, the only other piece was the community host agreement.
Right,
And what was that? Here. And we got, through the chair, we received a very helpful definition from Jane Monaleski regarding how we might define the host community agreement in our document, and you all got it, so I hope you have it. I can't remember.
I'm trying to track it
What
down.
date was that one from,
Yeah.
do you have?
I'm trying to track it down. Jane, do you have extra copies of it, perchance?
In the email,
Yeah, I'm not just trying to
Oh,
find
it's
it.
right
I
there.
didn't print it out, but.
Well, I printed it out, let's see. The proposed development, the language that Jane had submitted, Attorney Monaleski had submitted, the proposed development shall be subject to the provisions of a host community agreement, parentheses HCA, approved by and it says city council, so we would have to decide who would be responsible and I might think the town manager, but that's just shooting from the hip. The host community agreement shall establish a baseline site plan, design elevations, uses, program, signage, concept, and so forth, whatever the community wants to put in that document, whatever our concerns are, with the hopes of possibly setting the stage for some mitigation if there was an issue with, I mean, I'm just throwing this out there, traffic or excessive school enrollment, or, I don't know, but that was what was sent to us, which I really appreciated. But I was struggling, I thought we mentioned somewhere in the document
We
where we
do.
would discuss.
It's
It's,
under 10.
10D. 10D. Where we have host community agreement is required.
Oh, got it, okay. So what we had written, thank you, was the host community agreement to address impact issues such as but not limited to traffic mitigation, inclusionary housing, affordable housing, school enrollment, public safety, peer review as some examples. And the peer review would be, I don't think we should require it, but I think that would be an action of the planning board when they did this if they felt it was necessary.
Okay.
So I guess, is that location first the right location to put it? Additional provisions, so that's item D.
I would think so.
Okay.
It's just my thought.
We discussed at the very beginning at one point, didn't we?
Right, we did, I
Yeah.
just couldn't find it. And whatever definition you folks would like, it would be good. I have a host community agreement, which was copied to us in our first attempt at the bylaw, and this was sent to us by you did, Jane. And this one covers the addition of the number of rental apartments, which ones are affordable, townhouses. I mean, it was very specific about that particular makeup of that particular development. That was included in the host community agreement. There were issues to ensure traffic and public safety impacts, issues that would include no more than X number of units would be developed. I mean, I'm not certain how detailed we wanna go with this, and maybe that's not for this discussion today. It's more to have this in place, and when the project is presented, you will know what the issues might be, and then that would be part of how the planning board and perhaps the town manager and the applicant would work on this agreement.
So my thought with the host community agreement, the bylaw aspect of it, was for us to list that one has to be done.
Right?
And that certain things have to be addressed. And that way there it gives, whether it be the town manager or the council, a starting point of what to address, whether it be the traffic situation, the number of units or apartments or whatever.
And then
By addressed, it could be as simple as, not applicable in this situation. But at least that way there, it gives them a checklist. more
an
or less.
introduction.
I have a thought, I'm gonna do some separate research on this. I have
Okay.
talk to the town manager, see if I have permission to talk to the specialist attorney. And I have a couple thoughts on this, and I might get some language on, and I'll share with everybody.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
But thank you, Jane. It's very helpful. Well, that does my checklist.
All right.
So it must mean we're getting pretty close.
We are. I think I got a lot of stuff to work on, and I'm gonna share, and we'll hopefully have some, we can hopefully be awesome, if we could put this to bed next week, I mean, next week,
Yeah,
won't be
next
that
week.
quick.
We're
No,
gonna hold it to the.
no, blooper. Gaff, that was a gaff. All right,
All right.
go ahead, any other wrap-up stuff?
No, I was just gonna talk about, scheduling as we move forward.
Yeah,
Next week is next week. The following week, I believe, is school vacation.
oh, that's right.
And I don't know if that impacts on anybody. It doesn't me, but I'm just putting it out there.
Will we have access to this building?
I believe central office works that week.
Okay.
So can we meet next week in lieu of the following week?
February 10th?
We
I mean,
could,
my
if
feeling
it's
is-
a really quick meeting, because I have to be up near the courthouse in Pittsfield later not that late this afternoon, in the afternoon for an event, but if it's an hour meeting, I could do it.
Start a little earlier? Can we start
Can we
earlier?
start earlier?
He teaches a class,
Oh.
and
They're off.
the more,
Oh, no, they're not off.
well, the more that we have, less, we don't have a clerk per se. I need to have my redundancy over here too.
Oh, and we
So
need to,
he's checking right now too. I'm also gonna check my calendar. Bear with me for a second out here, I pull it out.
so the 10th is not good for you, or it would
It
only be
is,
an
it's a
hour.
truncated one. Let's take a look at.
Or later?
No, I really need to be in
I'm
Pittsfield
available.
by 3 o'clock, which basically means that I've lost a good chunk of my days, and I'm still a real estate attorney, so I'm still boxed in. All right, let me take a look at Tuesday. Tuesday, the 11th is doable, if this building's available, and if you guys, everyone's available.
Yeah.
How about Tuesday, the 11th? Are you available? Is your class over at 10:30?
And that's a council meeting day, so I don't know how,
Yeah,
that puts a
all
lot
right.
of pressure on you.
We can make that work.
That would be okay. We just need
Same
to,
time, though, 10:30.
10:30, yeah. So, why don't we plan for, if we can get the room, the 11th and also the 24th, so that we're,
So
got
the
two
7th
meetings.
It's available on the 17th, on that Monday.
Oh, it is?
But it's a holiday, though.
So,
Yeah.
Is that
Because the school,
President's Day?
that's the week,
President's
that's
Day is-
school
Yeah, so
vacation week.
Yeah, so we
Yeah,
can't,
but the central office doesn't take the school vacations.
Oh, gee,
yeah,
I
but
forgot.
we can't do a public hearing, meeting on a federal or state holiday.
I thought we could, we
We
just have to
cannot.
post it.
No,
ahead.
you can't. This
So let's
goes back to
let's go
the
back to the 11th
80s
and
and
the
stuff.
24th
Because it feels
as,
that you're restricting people's access or something.
Yeah.
All right, so what do we, the 11th is available to me, the 18th.
no, the whole week is, never
School-
mind.
Yeah.
So
That's
let-
right,
Let's knock out the 11th, let's just put that in now, if it's good for
If
everyone.
we can get the
10:30.
If you can get the room, the 11th, we'll take it, and if you're available.
So, I'm gonna let you book the room.
Who am I
Right.
talking to over there?
Kara,
Kara?
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
We need to take flowers, candy, or anything?
Oh, it's pretty simple, but
But you're available on the
I'm
11th?
available on
All right.
Somebody will be available.
Okay. 2:11 here.
And then let's do the 24th, so that at least we can always cancel it if we don't need it. But,
If I were a betting man, I'd say we need it.
okay,
All right, let's see if I can get both,
Okay.
the 11th and 24th as well. Okay, I am on it. Any other wrap-up before I entertain a motion to close? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to close this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded and thirded. All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everyone.
sure.